Can an SUV also be a sports car? Hello, welcome back to the channel. That is the question that I'm trying to answer today. So I have a brand spanking new Ferrari Purosangue, they call it, and Ferrari does not use the phrase SUV when it talks about this car, because it says, although yes, it is a tall car, it has the architecture and the character of some of its other sports cars. It replaces effectively the GTC4 Lusso. It is Ferrari's first tall four-door, four-seater car, all of those things together, but it still has some of the traditional Ferrari traits. Now, Ferrari has resisted making this car for quite some time, even though all of the rivals have done it, Aston Martin, Porsche, Lamborghini. Ferrari will say, well, none of them exactly rival this car. So let's find out if that is true. And then what we'll do is we'll have a little technical test specification discussion. I'll talk you around the inside, we'll have some driving impressions, and then try to answer the next very, very crucial question that follows, which is, will it drift? This is Ferrari's first ever car with 4 passenger doors. Unlike the Bentley Bentayga, Lamborghini Urus, Porsche Cayenne, etc., it doesn't share its architecture with any other vehicle, utilising instead a largely aluminium monocoque, in front of which is a 6.5 litre naturally aspirated 715 brake horsepower, 16.5 miles to the gallon, V12 engine, sited pretty much behind the front axle line. The drivetrain is derived from the FF/GTC4s that came before the Purosangue, in that there is a twin-clutch transaxle gearbox, which is now of 8 speeds, at the back, with a separate 2-speed unit taking power from the front of the crankshaft for the front wheels. Owners love their GTC4s and FFs, but wanted something more usable to drive, so this has 185mm of ground clearance, plus those 4 passenger doors, a hatchback, even ISOFIX child seat mounts. It is big, 4.97 metres long and 2 metres wide, but at 1.59 metres high, it's still lower than a Lamborghini Urus by 30mm and an Aston Martin DBX by 90mm. The Purosangue's transaxle helps distribute the 33 kilogram curb weight, 49 to 51% front to rear. There are 22-inch wheels on the front and 23s on the back, with very trick Multimatic spring and damper units doing the suspension, which we'll come to later. Right, to these rear doors then. If you pull and hold, that'll clip, it opens itself. You don't have to have it open itself. Ferrari has retained a B-pillar for torsional rigidity, and that opens backwards, really good to make it easier to get in and out of these rear seats. And there are 2 and 2 only because of that transaxle. So the gearbox is down here, and that means that unlike the rivals which have gearboxes at the front, you will only ever get 2 seats back here. In that way, it's not unlike the Aston Martin Rapide, all aluminium structure, V12 in the front, gearbox at the back, makes for the weight distribution being funny, not as practical as the rivals, Porsche, Lamborghini, the Aston Martin DBX. It's a different sort of car. Right, now if I push and hold the boot, come on, there we go. Now it gets a bit dark in here, so I don't know how much exactly you'll be able to see, but there is a smallish boot. But it can be made more practical by dropping the rear seats down, and this little floor comes up. This stows underneath. This panel also stows underneath, and Ferrari will sell you some sort of personalised, bespoke panel that goes over the top of those seat backs to cover this, which means you can load a bicycle or skis in it or whatever. And then on top of that, if you don't want them inside and you want them outside, it doesn't fit roof rail because it thinks they look a bit ugly, so it sells a bespoke thing that will go attached to the tailgate itself that you can then put skis or bicycles to, angled very stylishly like that. But I'll tell you what, I'll show you the front when we go for a drive, and I'll talk you through some of the driving controls because they're a wee bit different to the most recent Ferraris. I'll do that when we go for a spin. Okay, so welcome to the inside front cabin of the Purosangue, which is really nice. I mean, there's a Ferrari feel to it. It does, there's a sort of family DNA feel to the inside, but it's, heavily sculpted, it's nicely finished, it's big separation between driver and passenger in what is very distinctly a 4-person cockpit. And there are things which will be familiar from stuff like the 296 GTB, which is this little, supposed to look like the aluminium gate of a traditional manual gearbox selector, but of course doesn't have a manual gearbox anymore because it's all twin clutch auto stuff. But I can flick that puts me in manual. I get these nice big paddles here. Driving position is sound. Visibility is not bad. It's a little bit limited to the rear because they've put a small rear window in to make it look like the bottom of the body is wider than the top of the body, make it look a bit more muscly to some effect actually, but visibility is fine. I can just see the front wing there, but otherwise it just sort of disappears away from me. This is quite a big car. Don't feel like you're sitting really high. Doesn't feel anything like Range Rover-y at all. Nothing like that. It's much lower, partly because it is much lower, but also I suspect because they want it to feel still more sports car-y. Ergonomically, I think Ferrari felt a little bit stung by some of the criticism of the 296 controls because everything, and the Roma, because everything sort of migrated to panels on the steering wheel, which were then sort of hard to see, or you have to look at rather than, you know, just go by feel. So they've changed that a bit. Let's look at the Manettino, of course, which swings through from ice through to wet, through to comfort, through to sport, through to ESC off if you want to turn everything off. And then if you want to change the damper, these fantastically complex, brilliantly sophisticated dampers, if you want to flick through their modes, you give the Manettino a push, which is quite a novel solution. I quite like that. Rather than the old bumpy road setting they used to have as a separate button. This does what that does. There's now only one screen to change on this digital dash, and you push this little button to wake it up. And then the nice thing about, or the nicer thing about the way it works is it's now got a little groove, so you can kind of feel your way around rather than having to look down at it. Heating controls have gone to the centre. There is a rotary dial, but you've got to push a button to do it. And then if you want, say, the seat controls, you've got to get involved in swiping things left and right as well as rotating. So it's still a little bit more complex than it does, but it does deal with a lot of functions in a fairly compact, not too difficult to navigate, set of controls. And once it's set, I suppose you forget most of it. You can just get on with the process of driving, which is a pleasure. So Ferrari will say, look, this isn't an SUV, because its layout is not SUV-ish, can't tow anything. So I feel a little bit taller, sort of crossover-y rather than SUV-y, if you like. I mean, there's definitely a sort of Ferrari-ish, and not just because of that. There is a Ferrari-ish feel to the way it does things. Steering is quick. 2 turns lock to lock, has a similar sort of ratio, about 14:1, as I think the GTC4 Lusso had. It's not too dissimilar to that. But it doesn't feel as nervous as that. Those cars, plus the 812, any of the Ferrari V12 engine, front engine V12 stuff of late, they've got a long nose and they feel quite pointy, and the steering is really direct. This is direct, but it seems to take up, its initial response is a bit more sedate, and also it's not quite as nosy in the design. This car, the cab is a bit further forward than in the sports cars, even though the engine is set well far back, so it's quite a cleverly packaged thing actually. It doesn't feel like I'm sitting at the back of a very long, pointy V12 thing. It feels I'm very much more sort of on top of it, in the middle of it. And although the steering's quick, it's more relaxed in the way it takes up feel. It's heavier, I think. There's a sort of natural feel to it, which I like quite a lot. Well, you can leave the gearbox to mooch in auto if you want, or you can take control via the paddles. And again, Ferrari's paddles, as on the sports cars, are the best in the business. Because they've got the paddles here and they're big, Ferrari doesn't like column stalks because they sort of obstruct each other. And what that means is it's put all the stuff on the front of the steering wheel, but also on the back of the steering wheel. I get the indicators here, but on the back there's a way to change the radio channel or the source with a little button, and then the volume is on this side. And they all have a different texture because I can never see them. And there is a lesson there, not just for Ferrari, I think, but for car manufacturers in general. If you want people to know what a control is without taking their eyes off the road, they can feel different to the other controls. And yeah, alright, it's probably a bit uglier, but sometimes I think you've got to sacrifice some of that aesthetic for functionality. Anyway, so you can leave the gearbox manual, or take control with the paddles. Shifts really quickly, really cleanly. Steers, turns in really nicely. And this is where this suspension starts to do its funky thing that it does. I can control whether the dampers are in soft, medium or hard. Those spool dampers change to let oil flow through in the way that they want to. But then also, you've got this extendable bit that can put force into the damper. So if I am braking for a corner now, normally everything would compress. The screw inside the damper can push the top of that damper back up. However, it still allows the travel from the bottom to take up. So the damper acts exactly as the damper would act normally. But this separate FAST, F-A-S-T, Ferrari active suspension thing, means that there is less dive as it does it. And that's where it becomes really clever. You go, oh, and it took me a long time and a chat with several engineers before I got my head around it. But it's really clever stuff. It's really expensive stuff. It's really sophisticated stuff. And across the whole car, these things weigh about 25 kilos. A lot of that mass is unsprung, because I think the motors and the gears, they're all at the suspension end, the suspension end of the mechanism rather than at the body end. So they are bits that have to move up and down. Unsprung mass engineers don't like, because it's hard to manage. The lighter the wheels are, the lighter the brakes are. Engineers love that sort of thing. But this is so sophisticated that I think it overcomes it's worth having over the drawbacks. And what that basically relates to in terms of driving dynamics is a car that rides really well. Ferraris usually ride well anyway, especially for sports cars, but this rides really well. It absorbs bumps terrifically. And bear in mind, you've got like 23s on the back with 315 section tyres and 30 profile. I mean, it does not have any right to ride as well as it does. It is just beautiful. And the balance, there is no SUV, I don't think, that has the balance of this car either. It's got a heavy car in the nose. It's got the four-wheel drive system stuck out the front of that as well, which I'll come to in a minute. And it's so sophisticated because it's also got the electronically controlled rear differential. It's got these things going on at every corner, the suspension going on at every corner in place of the roll bars, in place of anti-roll bars, conventional anti-roll bars. It's got the geared four-wheel drive system at the front to worry about. It's entirely brake-by-wire. It's got to worry about. It's got twin-clutch transmission. But fundamentally, it's got electric power steering. And then it's got all the side-slip control and the advanced ABS and all that malarkey. But Ferrari spends a lot of time in simulators thinking about how to integrate all of this stuff before it even starts. And then, as the engineers say, well, we go out and we spend a long time tuning it so that it doesn't feel artificial, it feels natural. Once that suspension has decided what it's doing in a corner, it tries not to mess around too much through the corner. It's just, nope, this is what I'm going to do for this corner, and then the rest is up to you. And as a result, it has, for me, a really natural, nice feel and balance and flow to the way it does things. Puts power forwards when it wants to give you traction, so it's not Larry, but it will turn in convincingly. And we're on winter tyres, and it's cold, and of course it's going to spin up the rears if you want it to. It's just so brilliantly balanced that it is, for me, without doubt, the best driving tall car there is. So what is the obvious rival? Ferrari says, well, there isn't one because most of them are SUVs based on something else. And this does feel different. It does feel special, a unique product in a way that the Lamborghini does not, the Bentley does not. They are based on the same architecture, and when you talk to engineers from other companies, they'll go, oh yeah, we like this aspect of this one, this aspect of this one. Actually, the old Audi RSQ7 was arguably the best of them all. The Aston Martin feels special in a different way, but this feels more like, and I mean this as a compliment because I loved that car, an Aston Rapide
cross-country. It's got that sort of feel to it. It has a long-legged V12 GT with 4-seat, 4-door feel, just with a bit of extra height and versatility. Now, I really liked the Ferrari GTC4 Lusso and the FF that came before it, and owners love them too. I know a couple of guys who go, yeah, absolutely love this car, drive it as much as I can. But there is still that feeling with them when I'm approaching car parks, not confined spaces per se, but anything with a ramp up or down. I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, this big nose out the front is going to scrape off 3 grand's worth of carbon fibre if I'm not careful. The versatility about SUVs, and I think why people like them a lot, is because you just have to worry less while you're driving them. And this doesn't feel as precarious as driving one of those long-legged GT cars. Even though it's £315,000 in the UK. And by the time you've got on some options, Ferrari does have a lot of options, it's going to be a lot more than that. But it feels like a more relaxed car to live with. And there's no doubt people with a lot of money, they have families, they have hobbies, they have dogs, and that's why they tool around in expensive SUVs instead of supercars every day. Sometimes you want to get in something and use it normally. You can absolutely do that with this, or so it feels to me. You know, we've driven up in the snow, tight roads, car parks. I've even been to Aldi. It just has that feel of a car you can use much more frequently, in a much more relaxed fashion. I love it to bits. I love it to bits. There is one more thing. Will it drift? I mean, of course it will. You've seen it on the road, but I think we're going to head to a bit of snow. It's on winter tyres, and we'll see exactly what it'll do, and I'll try and sort of talk the way through what I think I can feel the 4-wheel drive system doing. Right, so what we've got is that on Ferrari events, sometimes they'll give us a few laps of Fiorano test track. Don't have that today, but what they have done is laid on a little smallish, it's almost like a rally station type course, and we'll just go down and try and answer the question, will it drift? Now, truth is, it's a short, twisty, but not that twisty a track, it's more like a rally stage, so, but see if we can get it tucked in, the nose tucked in, then back on the power, and the answer is yes. It's got 715 horsepower and most of it goes to the back, so of course it will. And when it does, it's really nicely balanced, but you can feel some stuff go to the front. It's very natural. It's not like you get sideways and then you suddenly feel it. It just wants to pull itself slightly straight as time goes on. But it is remarkable. The suspension travel is, and the deftness and the control is remarkable, and that is the end of it. I told you it was short. So we'll have to come back and revisit properly when it'll drift, because this is more of a sort of, I don't know, spin turn, power slide. Do you make a distinction between drifting and power sliding? Some people do, having sort of done a bit of both. I don't. I think if you're power sliding, you're kind of drifting, really, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, spin turn is a bit different. But I am in no doubt this will do it. I'm happy to say, will it drift? Yes, it will, and we put up that little tick in the way that the little box used to when we did the will it drift videos. But I think it would be useful to revisit later on. Ferrari did say that this is a first, their chief engineer said, look, this is a taster of this car, you should come back, try it in other circumstances too. Nice weather, summer tyres, test track. So we'll do that. But for now, thank you for watching. We're here every week on YouTube. You can find a review, including full technical details of those trick dampers and everything else, over at autocar.co.uk. Also in the magazine, whether you get that on print subscription or, on digital subscription, or in print, as it has been every week since 1895. But until next time, thanks very much. Love a like and a subscribe would be very kind. See you soon.